So we have seen loops, how to repeat something in Python programming or programming in general. Using Python syntax, we have seen how to repeat things. We have seen for loop, in fact, 2 types of for loop. There are more ways to use for loops. We will see one by one probably later. But we have seen for loop and while loop, which are 2 most common ways to repeat things. Also, we have seen an infinite loop as well. We have seen the infinite loop is taking CPU, and not all the infinite loops are bad, like the one we have seen. The one we have seen is taking the entire CPU. Next, what we're gonna see is something called scope. Scope is nothing related to loops in general, but it is related to functions and variables. So a little bit of theory before we get in the code. Some conceptual leaps we need to take to understand scope of a variable. So this is the slide of the loops, everything we discussed. We have seen all these points and we are going to discuss scope, like I mentioned. So in real world also, we have scope of certain things. It is not something we don't know. So this is a typical example in which something which has scope at home and we don't have scope at a different place because we don't carry such things around. Similarly, in programming as well, certain variables are accessible from certain parts of the program, and it is not accessible from certain other part of the program. This is very common in almost all the programming language. Python is no exception. Initially, when I learned scope, I had difficulty in understanding because the name of the variable is same. I used to try to access toothbrush from Office and I used to run into problems. So the concept here is certain things, certain variables we cannot access from certain places in the programming. So we'll see what are those places which we cannot access certain things. Mainly 2 types of scope we will discuss. One is local and global. There are other kind of scopes that is not part of our discussion. We don't worry about it. All we need to understand is the concept of scope. Also, at the same time, we will understand how to carry certain things around to access it from everywhere. So that is also something we will discuss. How to extend the scope of certain things so that it is accessible everywhere you go, every other part of the program. So that is something we will see as well. We will come back to this slide after discussing the code. We will discuss about it again once we have looked at the code. But the idea is very simple. Certain variables will create problems when it is accessed from somewhere else, and we'll see how to deal with it. So what we have here is a simple program. So as usual, let's look at line by line. In line number 1, we have a test variable. No surprise, it's a variable, normal variable, the ones we use in all our programs. We have seen this a lot. Test variable and assigning value 10 to it. So it has 10. Now there is a function definition. So we have the def keyword here and the colon and all sorts of stuff. So it's definition, and the definition is this. So we have line number 4, 5, and 7. They are print statement. And I want to attract your attention towards line number 5, print test variable. So in general logic, it should print this. This should print 10 in general logic. And then we are assigning another value here to the same variable, test variable. At least the name is the same. We'll see if it is same or different. That's a different discussion. That's what we are trying to learn now. And line number 7, we are printing again the same variable. So this is one and this is another one. So there are 2 print statements right here. And this is, we are expecting to print 1000 because we have changed the variable in line number 6. So that is the definition of the function. We are not executing the function yet. Where we are executing the function or calling the function, line number 9. That is where we are calling the function, just as usual, no arguments, no inputs. no output. It's a simple function which does some harmless printing. And finally, we are printing our variable, test variable here also. Lot of printings. Why we need this many printings? Let's see that. Also, one thing to notice here is that the Python Visual Studio Code analyzer is not giving me any kind of errors. There is no red mark. For example, if I delete one of these things, it is creating problem. This underline, curly underline has come here. If you look at here, it says the bracket was not closed. It is finding out. But in this case, it's not giving me any error. Let me do a control Z. It is not giving me any error. All looks peaceful. Happy. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to start executing it. No breakpoints. It is supposed to run peacefully, but it is not. When I execute the function, I'm getting an error. What is the error? Exception has occurred. Unbound local error. Doesn't make any sense, right? At least let's try to read this. Local variable, test variable referenced before assignment. So let's try to understand what is going on. So it says that there is something called local variable. We are yet to learn what is a local variable. So it says local variable test variable is referenced before assignment. Before we are creating the variable, we are using it in line number 5. But we have, in line number 1, we have assigned it. So why it is not taking that into account? So the reason is, this is something called global variable. So the scope of this variable is global. Scope global. It could be a little surprising for you, but you will get used to it. The scope of this variable is global, right? Now, the scope of this variable is local. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to remove this particular line. Let me comment that out for the time being. I commented that out. Now, line number 6 will create another assignment. Let's see that. So for that, I'll put a breakpoint here and run again. Let's see, I'm getting the error. At least I don't have line number 5 anymore. So it should not create any problems. I am assigning a variable here and I'm printing it again here. So it is completely fine because the assignment has been done. Now this will print 1000, no surprise, but we were getting problem here. Now let's keep executing. So we got 1000 printed inside the function. Now what we are going to do is, this particular line, print test variable, has printed 1000. Now this is the next print we have. So we have executed this function. This line has been executed and this print has printed 1000. Now this is also supposed to print 1000. Let's see that. Unfortunately or fortunately it didn't. Fortunately, of course, it printed 10. What is the reason it printed 10? Why it has not printed 1000, the one we have done here? The reason is, although the variable names are same, they are two different scope. They are two different variables. So the scope of this variable is global and scope of this variable is function or local. So if you search my name Anand George, you will get a lot of people. It is not exactly same as me. Also, if you search mostly your name, unless you have a very unique name, you will see a lot of people with the exact same name, but not all of them are you. Similarly, the variables also has different scope. So this is a global variable, global scope, and this is a local variable. They are different memory location, just the name is the same. They are pointing to different memory and has different value. They are two different bags with the same name. They can have entirely different things at the same time. Another thing we need to notice is that the scope also talks about the life of the variable. So this local variable died or cleaned up by the Python runtime. Once the function execution is over, we cannot access that variable outside that function. So the scope of that variable is inside the function. So that is another important point to notice. So the local variable is a local to what? Local to the function in this case. Now, what is the use of global variable? Can we access global variable inside the function? Yes, we can. Then why did we get a problem here? Let's see that. What is the problem with it? The problem here is that this particular line doesn't know that this is a global variable. It is expecting a local variable. So we can add another statement here, global test variable. Now, what the runtime does is it connects this and this. So this statement, line number 5, connects this and this. Now, there is no local variable inside this function. The test variable has become global. Now let's see the program execution. I'm going to run it, start debugging. Previously we got problem in line number 6, and this time it went fine and it printed 10 because it's pointing to this variable. And then I'm printing it out. It has printed 1000, and that 1000 change has reflected here because we are changing the global variable. There is only one variable now. Previously there were two variables, one is global and local. Now there is only one variable, which is the global variable we have created here. So it printed 1000. So very important to understand the difference. Sometimes it's a little confusing. All we need to understand is that when we don't have these two lines, we have two variables with the same name. That is what we need to understand. And this variable is available only inside the function. It is local to the function. And once we goes out of the function, this variable is deleted, or that particular memory is freed by the Python runtime using a feature called garbage collection. We'll get to it later, garbage collection and stuff related to it. But for the time being, this variable is accessible only inside the function. This is a global variable. It is accessible everywhere inside the function as well. That's what we have proven here using the keyword global. So one more thing I would like to show you is that what is the behavior when it comes to two different functions. So I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste it here. I'm going to call that function as well, function 2. So function 2 is going to get called here, and I'm going to make this function 2. This also I'm going to make 2. So we have two different functions, and I'm going to make 2000 here. Now let's see the output. First, let's predict the output and see if that comes into our theory so far we have discussed. So we have a test variable here, just like before, scope global, and we have two functions. Both function has local variable here and here. One local variable is 1000 and the second one is 2000. As per theory, this is a local variable inside this particular function, and this is a local variable inside this particular function. This is not accessible outside. This is also not accessible outside, including this function. So how many variables we have in total? Think about it before you answer. How many variables we have in total in this program? 1, 2, and 3. Total 3 variables we have. So this is going to print 1000. This is going to print 2000 because it's a different variable. This is the third variable. First, second, and third. All of them has same name. Don't forget that. Only the scope is different. So this is going to print 1000. This is going to print 2000. And how about this? It is going to print 10 because it's printing the actual global variable right here. All right, let's see that. So I have a breakpoint here. I'm just going from the breakpoint. So this is the first print inside function 1. And then it is printing as expected 1000, the local variable. Then it is executing function 2 because function 1 is executed first, and then function 2, it is coming to function 2. And then it is creating this variable. So this C line number 15 is creating the local variable, and it is printing right here 2000. And finally, no surprise, it is printing 10, which is the global variable. So we have 3 variables, different variables. Now what we're going to do, we're going to enable global. Instead of making 3 variables, we are going to make it 1 here and here. Now let's predict the output. Now, how many variables we have? We have only one variable, which is a global variable. And that's a variable we are accessing from everywhere. So if you change it here, it'll change everywhere else. Let's see that. So what this line is going to print. So we have 2 extra print statements as well. So this is going to print 10 because that's the global variable. We have seen that before as well. And this is going to print 1000. Now, what about this? What is this going to print? This print. This is going to print 1000 because we have changed the global variable right here. So that is accessible from this function as well. Very important. Global variable is accessible from everywhere. So this is going to print 1000 and this is changing it and making it 2000. This is going to print 2000, no surprise. And finally, this print is also going to print 2000 because we have changed it here. Let's see that. So the first print, which is inside function 1, this print, line number 6 is printing 10 inside function 1. Just before that, we have function 1. If you want to debug this line by line, feel free to do it. Never hesitate. Line number 6 is printing 10 and line number 8 is printing 1000. No surprise about that. Then the interesting line was line number 14. Line number 14 is printing 1000 because it's the same variable we are printing, global variable. Line number 14 is printing 1000 and line number 15 is changing it again. So this is global. This comment is wrong. I have not changed it. This is global. Global at the moment. It's not local. And it is printing 2000 right here. Now the final print is here and it is also printing 2000. So play around with it. We are going to see one more example because not very relevant example for Python, but the reason why we are looking at that example is because certain programming languages like C, for example, has more scope inside a function, but Python has local and global. Pretty straightforward that way Python is. So one question you may have in mind is why programming languages complicate this? Why there is a different scope? Why can't that global scope is necessary? The reason is that when the programs get big, scopes are going to help you. Otherwise, when you change a variable inside a function, it changes everywhere else. And it causes a lot of confusion when the programs get big. In small programs like the ones we have seen, we know how to keep track. But when the program get big, it gets so confusing. So scope is a very useful feature in programming. Now let's look at one more program with scope. And let's relearn what we have learned so far.